Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the disability community.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Sarah Lee, and I'm currently working at a utility right now and in Southern California. And before that, I used to work for the Assistant District Attorney's Office in Philadelphia. And before then, I used to work for a congresswoman. So the how I got involved with disability advocacy is through my personal passion for helping individuals with disabilities and specifically veterans. And so two parts to that, though. So I'm Korean American. I was raised by Korean immigrant parents who taught me the gratitude to have for our American veterans because of what they did in the Korean War and World War II, of course. And South Korea wouldn't be where it is today if not for our American troops. And for me to have learned later on, going through life and working for a member of Congress, to see how poorly we treat our veterans, we could certainly do a better job as a government. We ask them to make such a great sacrifice for us, um, and then unfortunately, our vets don't get the support that they need from our government later on, and a lot of them have disabilities due to their service. And so that's how I got involved specifically with advocacy. In terms of my personal life, I've always been a self advocate and an advocate for members of my family, specifically my dad. He has a very, very rare condition that started to manifest in his adulthood, in his late 20s. And he eventually, was losing his ability to use the bottom half of his body. So I've always been an advocate for my dad personally and just kind of at home dealing with anything else that we got to do, right? The insurance companies, work, Social Security office, things like that. So when I went into the Congresswoman's office after college, I wanted to really make an impact for veterans with disabilities, and so I did casework for our vets in the constituency that I worked in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what are some of the things that you're doing in terms of like disability rights and advocacy?
Yes. So right now, what I'm doing at the utility is ensuring that the programs and services that we have for our customers are accessible and are set up properly for customers with disabilities. So, as well as members of their household. So, many of us who when the power goes out for a number of reasons, it could be because of weather or maybe even just a maintenance outage. For us, if we for some people, they get that message and it's like, okay, well, my power is going to be out for 10 hours on such and such date. I'll get ready for that. But for others, if there's a power outage, it impacts their ability to move around, their ability to communicate, even, right? And so, because it's critical to their life and safety, I work to make sure that our programs are designed for people with disabilities, with people with disabilities, and that we're communicating in a way that is effective, clear, and inclusive.
Mm-hmm. My next
Yeah.
question is, how do you go about addressing the, the, the barriers that people with disabilities so often face? Like, what do you do in that regard?
Sure. So the barriers that I see in my work right now are really having to do with communication. So communication is key, right? It's very important for us to be able to communicate very important information in a quick and simple manner. And unfortunately, a lot of companies, not all of their programs and services have been made to be, for instance, accessible to people who speak American Sign Language, or who may otherwise have hearing issues, or who don't, maybe they don't have any hearing or vision loss, but they need to be able to navigate the computer in such a way that, right, their screen reader can read it back to them, or that the closed captioning is appropriate, it's available. Even sometimes in this Zoom world that we live in, we have all these meetings and a lot of folks need closed captioning. And at the beginning of the meeting, sometimes folks don't even remember to ask and check and make sure, is there anybody in the audience who would need that, right? So it's just a lot of little things that I know are a barrier to access to a lot of customers with disabilities. And sometimes if the power goes out and if they live alone, and they have an electricity dependence, and now all the food in the refrigerator has spoiled, they don't have, some people don't have family around that could bring them food and other replenish their supplies. So there are a lot of barriers that people with disabilities can face. Yeah. There's just a lot. It goes a lot. And I'm sure you've heard on your podcast as well that it affects, having a disability is very difficult in the sense that we live in a world that's not made for people with disabilities. And so we have to adjust to those things. And so, yeah, it goes beyond just making sure that our meetings are, have an ASL interpreter. It's, well, when we send the instructions out on how to use a battery, is the battery in a format that is accessible and consumable to somebody with a disability? So lots of things to consider, and yeah, many barriers that we got to address.
Yeah, my next question is, any stakeholders that you specifically partner with in your efforts like disability justice and advocacy?
Sure. So the stakeholders that I get to partner with are throughout the state of California, and some of them represent different departments of the state of California. So we have Department of Social Services, we have the California Office of Emergency Services, which is under the governor's office. There are other stakeholders that we work with, such as a DeafLink. They are a provider of ASL interpretation services, and yeah, quite a few organizations that we work with.
Lastly, how do you combat the stigma of disability from from a disability justice advocacy perspective? So what do you do to sort of dismantle that and make things more inclusive for people with disabilities?
Yeah. Well, it's in the day-to-day work, making sure that, right, just as you said, we're including people with disabilities in the conversation, because there is no experience like lived experience that really teaches us uh, how to develop a program, what kind of considerations to take in. So how to fight the stigma. Now that's I got to say, that's just the good fight. That's the good fight that we've got a long road ahead. And the way I do that is to always speak openly and comfortably about disability when I can, for whatever is comfortable for myself, because part of also dispelling the myth of setting up programs for customers with disabilities is that it's not that people aren't able to support themselves or make sure that they're, it's more like, are we providing the resources that are actually needed, and are we doing it in a way that's efficient and helpful and useful and not presumptive? And it's not oh, well, we think you might need this, so we got it here for you. Making sure
hmm
that it's thoughtfully carried out.
Yeah, yeah. I think that that is really important to consider, the types of things that will work for them and that just meet their needs. It can't just be whatever they throw out. It just has to be tailored to their needs, obviously.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. And the best way to do that is to have key stakeholders in the conversations with you when you're planning your strategy, planning the program and how it's being developed and will be implemented.
Yep, definitely agree.
Yeah, yeah.